I think we're ready to roll here. So welcome everyone, and for those that are watching at home or wherever you are, welcome to first meeting of the month of March. So got a nice little agenda here. We'll get right at it. So first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda.
Moved by, now would we take a motion followed by the amendment? Or?
He can do it all as one.
Okay. We do have a small change, so Councillor Fawcett's going to present that. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. That the agenda for the regular meeting of the City Council be held on Monday, March 7th, 2022, be amended by adding under the order of bylaws, bylaw number 7320 to amend bylaw number 7232 to borrow funds for the extension of 34th Street from Pacific to McDonald Avenues, and the agenda as amended be adopted.
You have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Cameron. And normally you have to debate too much on the agenda, but we'll have any discussion, especially since we're adding an item. Not seeing anything. I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And next item, please.
The confirmation of the minutes of the special meeting of council held February 17th.
Motion for that, please. Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Frangi. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Next item, please.
Confirmation of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held February 22nd.
Moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Again, any changes or omissions? Again, seeing none, we'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of committee reports, I apologize, there is a correction on the agenda. It's a report from the Brandon General Museum and Archives Limited.
Okay, Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, just bringing a brief update. The Brandon General Museum and Archives Board met this past week. We are happy to welcome and introduce our new staff member, which I'm going to bring up. We'd like to welcome and introduce our new staff member, Keith Waterfield. Keith actually joins us from Ontario and has some local ties as well, in that his family is working at the art gallery as well. So we do have a new staff member there. At the same time, we'd like to recognize Ali Wochuk, who has moved on to the Westman Regional Library. So we do have a new staff member there as well. We'd also had met and decided that the museum will open again to the public on March 15th. At this time, due to ensuring COVID safety and that sort of thing, we are going by appointment only. So you can reach out to the museum through their website, which is brandongeneralmuseum.ca. So once again, we are opening March 15th by appointment, and then we'll ease into that and then move to regular hours from there. So.
Very good. Well, encouraging news, and certainly welcoming Keith Waterfield as a staff there. So that's great that really not a long period in between changeovers. So that's good news. So any questions of Councillor Cameron on the BGMA report? Not seeing any just now, so thank you very much, Councillor Cameron. And next up, I believe we have
The verbal report from the Keystone Centre.
Keystone Centre, Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Keystone Centre regular board meeting was held on February 23rd. We reviewed the updated public health orders and their impact on event planning for the Keystone Centre. That included the procedural and staffing changes along with event scheduling. We did pass a motion to waive the assignment of 75% of the 2020-2021 operating surplus to the capital reserve. It was felt with the uncertainty of the impact of the pandemic on the current operations, the 2021-2022 fiscal year, that it was preferable to have the $180,000 surplus available for operating expenses moving forward. Financially, the year-to-date surplus for the 21-22 fiscal year is approximately $280,000 as of the end of December. However, event cancellations and postponements in January and February will likely eat into that number by our next quarterly update. And our Governance and Nominating Committee and Finance and Administrative Affairs Committee continue to create and update policies on behalf of the Board of Directors.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lupke. Again, we'll open the floor for any questions that anybody might have about the Keystone Report. Again, under the circumstances, quite encouraging news, and I'm grateful that Keystone is able to keep its head above water and the doors open through all of this. So thank you very much to you and your board and staff there, Councillor Lupke. And no questions on that. I believe we have a report from the police service, police board. Sorry, I forgot what we're called. Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a report on our regular police board meeting held on March 7th. The Chief of Police reported on his involvement of local, provincial, and national level. Chief noted that he had been able to do more activities in the community due to the restrictions on COVID being more relaxed. The police chief reported on the 2021 budget details. Although the 2021 budget is still being finalized, the chief reported that $150,000 favorable budget. This is driven by four factors: $52,000 less in overtime used, and an anticipated $31,000 savings from staff using bank time rather than payouts. Also $21,000 in canceled training and $18,000 less in legal fees. The police chief also reported on $60,000 that was being used in overtime for prisoners' transportation into Winnipeg. There was a fulsome discussion on this point. The 2022 budget was discussed and a motion accepted to reduce the police budget by $50,000, with the removal, or that removal being from the equipment and fleet reserves. The police chief updated the board on the 2021 annual report. The report highlights the work of the past year and is mandatory in reporting requirements for the Manitoba government. The police chief updated the board on the 2021 strategic plan. This is also a document that is required to be reported to the provincial government. Both the annual report and the strategic plan will have their final versions prepared and sent to the provincial government by March 30th, 2022. Discussion was held in regards to Councillor Lupke's inquiry regarding image capture devices, red light cameras, and photo radar. After a robust discussion, it was felt that the chief of the Brandon Police Services Administration would need to do some further exploration of the concept and costs, ongoing maintenance, etc. The chief will report back to the board and council when this fact-finding mission is completed. A discussion held on the 2022 Canadian Association of Police Conferences to be held on September 7th to 11th in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Brandon's Police Services was presented, Brandon Police Staff Recognition was presented for the past quarter, recognizing Inspector Mike Pellicetti, who retired in February after 32 years of service. Retirement also of Gina Barclay Ricketts, former victim services worker, after 33 years of service. Promotions of Mark Elaine from Staff Sergeant to Inspector, and Kevin McLean from Sergeant to Staff Sergeant, and Jeff Hode from Constable to Sergeant. Brandon Police Services also recognized the dedication of Troy Tripp and Mrs. Megan Warkin, financial officer and executive assistant respectively, as they move on after 4 years to their positions within the City of Brandon. Brandon Police Services also welcomes Laurette Delorier as the new EA and are in the final processes of hiring a new financial officer. Just to touch on a few stats, the Brandon methamphetamine crisis in the City of Brandon is an ongoing concern for Brandon Police Services members. They were successful in removing approximately 4,509 grams of methamphetamine from the streets in 2021. For the year of 2021, a total of 35 possession charges have been laid, and that would be a decrease of about 10% from the 2020 respectively, and 38 trafficking charges were laid, a decrease of approximately 14% from the 2020 representatives. Total number of calls for service received for 2021 would be 38,812, which includes 600 bylaw related calls and 1,954 animal control calls. The average per call per sworn officer is 413 calls per month. Regarding 2022, for the month of January, there have been 4 trafficking charges so far laid to date, and the total number of calls for service received in the month of January for 2022 is 2,970, which includes 24 bylaw-related calls and 82 animal control calls. This is my report from the Police Board.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cullen. And Police Board only meets quarterly, hence the reports might be a little bit longer than some others that meet monthly. So thank you for that, and we'll open the floor to any questions that there might be. Councillor Cullen or anyone else on the Police Board, which includes Councillor Berry and myself, and of course our City Manager sits at the Police Board as well. And Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Councillor Cullen. I did happen to read the summary of the Police Board meeting in the Sun on Saturday, and it seemed like quite a bit of the discussion on the photo enforcement program was about the financial aspect, and I'm wondering how much discussion there was on the community safety aspect of a photo enforcement program there was at the meeting.
There was a robust conversation. We had decided that after a lengthy discussion, that we needed more information. We wanted to make sure that we were actually going in with the right information. We'd asked the chief to gather some information from other communities that are presently using the service and sort of come back with an idea of the numbers as far as cost, what it would cost to maintain it, different arrangements as far as whether this would be something that would be jobbed out so that we'd end up with whether we would own the cameras, we would have to maintain all that, and then commission based as far as what it would cost and what the real numbers would end up being once we sort of hit the end. The other thing you have to sort of take into consideration is sometimes that these things start off being extremely profitable, and then all of a sudden, as the compliance ends up being put into place, like you would really hope is that the speeding and infractions would go down based on the fact that we do have all the cameras in place. But at that time, then all of a sudden now the revenue also takes a dip, and you have to worry about whether now you've got an ongoing expense that doesn't generate anything or look after itself. So again, we decided that we didn't have that information at our hand. So we decided that we would reach out to other communities that are using it in Winnipeg and maybe Medicine Hat and other places and sort of find out how their experiences were, and then bring that back and have that discussion, and then bring it back again to the board and to the City Council.
Yeah, and I, through your worship, thank you, Councillor Cullen, and through your worship, I do hope that when we do get the final report that there's a lot of information in there on the impact it can have on community safety. Goal of a photo enforcement program is to reduce collisions and injuries by reducing light running and speeding. And obviously, I think the financial aspect does have to be considered, but I think it should be even more so on the fact of what it does for community safety. We're going to be talking about changing a one-way street to a one-way later tonight. And when we had that public hearing, there was a lot of talk about enforcement. We need more enforcement. We need more enforcement. So I hope that's all part of the consideration.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Councillor Lupke and Councillor Cullen's response, and certainly all sides of it need to be examined, and also it was considered to try and reach out to communities that were maybe a little more similar in size to Brandon. Then certainly we'll have easier access to get some information from Winnipeg. Obviously, BPS has a close association with Winnipeg, and we have a close association with the city of Winnipeg and their city council, and so we can probably get quite a bit of information there. But it was felt by the board that we maybe would try and find some more modest-sized communities closer in Brandon size to get their feedback, and what, especially one that's been running for a while, and see if they've got any statistics in terms of how it's impacted public safety and just what impact it has on their operation. So police board and police service are going to take a very serious look at the whole prospect. It was just felt that we needed to be certain that it was made sense for Brandon and Brandon Police Service before asking the province. I don't think that we want to take it lightly that we would ask the province to change any legislation unless we were serious about wanting to implement it. So any other questions? Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. A good presentation from Councillor Cullen. And I'm glad that you singled out some of the trafficking charges that have been coming through. We've been talking with Chief Balkin about that quite a bit. And I know that he has focused a lot on that previously, but we had all those other issues you addressed. And I hope that council continues to get behind supporting our staff in really addressing that. We have issues all around the community. Talk to the police about that. That is one of the key pieces, and it doesn't care about anything. Predators that are out there, and the police have to address them. They don't care about anything or anyone, and they don't care where you live, what part of the community. They're awful, awful people, and the police are our best line of protection for some of that stuff. So glad you pointed that out, and I hope there's a lot more to come. And Chief Balkin, keep your team at it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fawcett. That's certainly a point well taken, and I'm sure that message will get back to the chief and his team. And any other questions from the police? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Before we take a motion, are there any other committee reports that we may not have been aware of? Not seeing any others. A motion to accept the 3 reports given would be in order, please. Moved by Councillor Lupke, seconded by Councillor Barry. Any discussion? Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
And right off the bat, Councillor Chaboyer. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'll have 2 inquiries.
Okay.
Another one I just will bring up today. Does the city have a plan in place for potential flooding this spring? Are the ditches and culverts going to be cleared when the snow melts so it will flow away from citizens' properties?
Thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Ron Bowles, our city manager, who does have a response ready for us. Go ahead.
Thank you, through Mayor Kress, to Councillor Chaboyer. Thank you very much for the question. It's a good one. This one is answer is provided by Mr. Patrick Pulak, who is your General Manager of Operations as well. He is also the chair of the Drainage Task Force. So he goes on to say, during the spring snowmelt season, The concern is not so much overland flooding as it is ice blockage on catch basins and culverts. Despite the fact that there is substantial snowpack on the ground, the rate at which snow melts does not create favorable conditions for overland flooding. That said, during this time, steam truck crews will be out in full force in an effort to keep the drainage areas free from ice. And then he goes on to say, if the public observes drainage issues, they are encouraged to report it by calling operations, so it's day or night, at 204-729-2285.
That's great. Thanks for the information. And it would also be useful if some information is probably provided that citizens can do on their own properties too, to reduce, flooding toward their homes.
You could maybe look into, maybe putting something on our website, little tips that, people can use, obviously, keeping their own downspouts and so on. When the city is trying to keep culverts free of ice, you need to do that at home and, keep, if your home is receives flooding at times or water in your basement and whatnot, it's good to get as much snow away from near your foundation as possible. And I'm sure our operations and even our building inspector could probably have some tips that we might be able to place on the website for that.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. There's a lot of snow out there this year.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I have another inquiry. I just thought it might be useful to bring up to council. Has the city ever considered vehicle hybrid conversion kits? I just received, in my role as procurement officer at Brandon University, a national standing offer that's offered through the province. They're looking at conversion kits for, your regular trucks, Ford, Rams, GMCs, Chevs. And it might be something worth looking at because it would be good for fuel efficiency and, most important, reducing our carbon footprint and reducing emissions. And it's becoming, my understanding from this information is it's becoming more affordable to get conversion kits. So if you'd like, I could give you this information and you could maybe check to see if our fleet of services has considered something like that.
That'd be very good. Thanks very much. And please pass the information on to administration. They'll make sure that it gets to fleet, procurement,
Interesting.
whatever departments. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. And that was all the inquiries we were aware of, but some others sometimes do arrive late in the day, so we would take those now if there are any. Okay, not seeing any others. Thank you very much for those. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
The order of announcements, Your Worship.
Announcements this evening. Not seeing any hands up. So I had planned on just making a few comments about the invasion in Ukraine. And, of course, everyone is certainly well aware of this atrocity, in my view, that it is taking place, and does certainly have a local impact. As everyone is quite aware, we do have and have had a long and very significant connection to Ukraine. Brandon's very beginnings and the whole beginnings of Westman really had many people from Ukraine come to Brandon in our area early in our history, and as a result, a lot of people with Ukrainian backgrounds and ancestry reside in Brandon and area, and then as a result of the immigration that we've enjoyed here in Brandon over the last couple of decades, we've had significant more what I would call new waves of people from Ukraine, and a lot of new and younger families in our community, and those in particular still have direct relatives, often their parents, their grandparents, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, and friends and so on, still residing in Ukraine that are facing all of this very troubling upheaval. So as I think most are aware, there have been a variety of activities occur. There was a significant rally on Saturday. Was initiated by Brandon University in conjunction with the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, the sort of Manitoba division of that. So the rally started at Brandon University, where they have raised the Ukrainian flag, and then a march occurred from BU to City Hall here Saturday evening, where we had a flag-raising ceremony. Several city councillors were in attendance. A couple of our MLAs. There was an MLA from Winnipeg actually had come out for it as well, which was nice to see, and just quite a large gathering, several hundred people, and it was quite a moving and emotional event, in my opinion, and it was really great, as we would often witness, to see such a tremendous outpouring of Brandonites coming out to support and show their solidarity and love for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, both here and abroad. And so we could be really proud of our community. Again, there's lots going on. I know that there's fundraising efforts, places where people can donate. There's fundraising socials coming up. A person famous in the community has made these little rocks, Pray for Ukraine, that I'll just call her Debbie. And she does her little hand-painted rocks, and she did provide me one. I'm wearing a tie that I was presented with at one of the Ukrainian pavilions during our winter festival one year. So again, I would really congratulate all of the organizers and volunteers and Ukrainian people and just people of Brandon that have really been coming together, making contributions, and as much as anything else, just showing their support for Ukraine. We would sure all hope for a early end to all of this. It's been horrific to watch, as I'm sure you would all agree, and we just have to stay vigilant and supportive to our friends and relatives, both here and abroad in Ukraine. So I did want to mark that, and again thank members of council that have been on social media, coming out and doing their best. This is again another example when we have a crisis. Everyone does tend to come together here in Brandon, so we're very fortunate to live in that kind of a loving and caring community. So with that, although I would take any other comments or questions about this, if there are any. Probably not. Okay. And again, just before we move off of announcements, if there are any others, I would take them. Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to mention the Assiniboine River Basin Initiative had their conference this last week. It was a virtual conference once again because we'd been forced into COVID restrictions once again. We listened to 3 or 4 scientists and weather scientists. The Assiniboine River Basin Initiative we belong to as a members group. It represents Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and North Dakota, so the entire Assiniboine River Basin area, so that feeds the Assiniboine River, Souris River, all those other contributors. We again, one of the theme of the conference was to expect and to be able to be prepared for more extremes in weather, and it seems that it's one of those kind of contradictory things that says that, well, it's going to be wetter and it's going to be drier and it's going to be we're going to end up with less water and we're going to end up with more water. So it's just the extremes that are hitting, showing up in all the science. The number one reason for that is as the temperature warms globally, if the weather is across the entire world gains 2 degrees in temperature, the actual atmosphere, our atmospheric weather, our atmospheric rivers that carry all the moisture around the world and everything. Bottom line, they can hold anywhere from 17 to 20% more water. So at any given time when it decides to open up on us and rain, it has the capacity to dump 17 to 20% more at any given time. So therefore, now when it comes down to the fact that the world is heated up, it means the deserts and the arid areas become more arid, more dry. It's become quite a challenge for anybody, knowing that you have to store water, and you also have to know when to dump that storage and make sure that you got room for the big event. And so that's where all municipalities and all cities our size and right across the world we're having to deal with. So anyway, that's I just wanted to touch base on that. If you wanted to go and check out some of the speakers, the conference itself was recorded. I would highly recommend you listen to Bob Stanford. He's one of our scientists here in Canada, and he's also on the United Nations when it comes to any of the weather extremes. But he had a great presentation, and so did all the other guys that were there. So again, I wish it was in person, but whatever. And I also noticed that we had some staff members that were also involved and had signed up, including Mr. Pulak, I believe, was on that list. So again, just letting you know that we are trying to do what we can with the RB board, and we're doing the best we can in this COVID environment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cullen. Any questions of Councillor Cullen on the RB report? Glad you were able to attend that, along with some of our staff that are engaged in this space, and just becoming a more and more important realm all the time. So thank you. And again, any other announcements before we move off? Okay, thank you for that. We can move on to the next item of business, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, we have an amendment to the fee schedule regulation regarding the entrance fee for residential concrete at the landfill site.
Very good. Councillor Cullen, go ahead.
I move that fee schedule 002 be amended by adding to page 4 of Schedule A under the residential tipping fees per load and other applicable fees, section item G, concrete entrance fee, and a fee of $5 for all residential loads of concrete.
And seconded by Councillor Parker. Mover wish to speak?
Yes, Your Worship. This is something I brought up at our budget time period. Just to let you know, as you probably, if you've been out to the landfill recently, you'll find that we had changed our fee structure last year, which would charge $5 fees for wood charges because the wood was getting out of control as far as the big wood pile, and we didn't have even the monies that we could look to find a solution to that problem. At the same time that one was changed, we had one exemption that I knew of that was still in place, which was the concrete fee. So let's say that as it sits right now, we'd be charged $5 if we trimmed up a tree or did a cleanup around the house or did whatever, and it would cost us $5 to go in there and dispose of it at the landfill. However, if you jackhammered up a sidewalk and you took that same concrete in a half-ton truck or whatever and took it out there, it would be exempt. So what we're proposing here is that now that concrete fee would be in place, and it would be charged out the same amount as it would be for if you were bringing in a mattress or bringing in a dirty load of some sort of cleanup around your house or whatever. And I think this kind of cleans that up now that, if you're going into the landfill now, it's pretty much a straight $5 fee if you're going above and beyond what you would collect in your bins.
Thank you very much. We could ask administration if there are any questions. This is a fairly straightforward one. Certainly would welcome any questions if there are any, and certainly other speakers. Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious, what happens with the concrete once we store it at landfill? Does it just sit there like our wood pile, or can it be repurposed for something else?
I'll have to ask General Manager of the division, Mr. Patrick Pulak.
Through your worship to Councillor Chaboyer, my understanding is it used to be repurposed. It no longer can be repurposed. The idea now is that it does get mixed in with regular waste. And it's used as a fill product as well.
Thank you.
Okay, don't go away. There might be other hands up. Councillor Cullen?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of give you a little bit more information there. Last year, the exempted loads were about 1,200 exempted loads. The concrete does have to be moved around with heavy equipment because it doesn't get much heavier than what we're dealing with there, and sometimes it'll have rebar in it and other little things that it's kind of like it doesn't even sound like it's 100% pure. Like sometimes a lot of times it's coming in with rebar sticking out of it and sort of thing. So it's kind of a nasty little piece. But and then it would basically, if you put a $5 fee on it based on last year, you'd be raising about $6,000. But that helps it just makes it user pay to the point that if you're jackhammering up a sidewalk or whatever it is, you've got this kind of stuff that it's not spread out over everyone. It's spread out onto the people that are bringing it in. That's the people that are going to be charged. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions that there might be, especially while Mr. Pulak's at the podium? Not seeing any others. Thank you, Patrick. Back to the motion as presented. Any other discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Conversion of a portion of Aberdeen Avenue to a one-way street between 34th Street and Durham Drive. And I would note, Your Worship, that a motion was tabled at the December 6th meeting regarding this item, and if Council wishes, they can bring it back to the table for discussion from the table.
We just need a motion to bring it back from the table first. Somebody would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Probably not much discussion on that, so we'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So now that motion is back on the table. I didn't bring all my notes with me. I'm guessing that Councillor Barry made the motion, so I think we'll allow him to reopen the discussion then if you would like, and it is in your ward, so go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Madam Clerk, do we need to
I think you should read the motion again. Thank you.
Now be resolved that effective January 1st, 2022, Aberdeen Avenue between Durham Drive and 34th Street be made into a one-way street to traffic to head west onto 34th Street only, and no entry to Aberdeen Avenue from 34th Street will be allowed for a test period of 1 year to expire December 31st, 2022.
Okay, the motion that was duly moved and seconded. So we can resume debate on that. And again, give the mover, but did we want to have a report? Was it planned to have a report? We've been supplied with a written report. I wasn't sure if administration were going to make any verbal report as they often do.
I think they're available to answer questions, Your Worship.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. Great, and yes, I know there's a report. It's 40 pages long. I hope everybody had time over the weekend to have a look at it and review some of the stats in it, because there were some very interesting statistics that were handed to us. This is one of these situations that came up in a ward meeting. As of course everybody knows, there's a lot of concern from residents on Durham Drive about the volume of traffic, the speed of traffic that was causing safety concerns. We were fortunate enough to actually have a public hearing on this back in February, where we had residents from Durham and actually from the area as well come out and speak to the motion, both for and against. It was great to have this public hearing. It was great to be able to hear kind of people's opinions on both sides of the story. I know there was quite a few email pieces sent in as well to the city clerk's office. I have had several phone calls and emails even between the time that the motion came out in December and that. And again, I'm going to go back to this as one of those situations where no matter what we do, we're wrong. Because in somebody's eyes, we're going to be wrong. We're talking about safety as opposed to convenience. We heard that at the public hearing. And it really is an issue of safety versus convenience, because every call I got, every email I got, the person that was opposed to it was all about convenience. It's going to take me a minute longer to get where I want to go because I can't take that road. And it's, as councillors, we need to make a decision now what's in the best interest of not only the area residents, but of all the area residents and the citizens of Brandon that actually use that street. Because are we going to go down that rabbit hole of starting to close off streets because now it got busy for some people? Or are we going to leave things the way they are and try to maybe resolve this problem another way? Honestly, my personal opinion, the only way to resolve this problem on Durham is to stop the volume of traffic coming down there. That's the only way. And the only way to do that right now is to shut down Aberdeen into a one-way. That's the only way this problem is going to get solved. So we're back to the debate, safety over convenience. And this is where council is going to come involved in the discussion and see which way we want to go, because we heard a lively discussion about that at the public hearing and that. So I wish there was other ways we could look at this. I know the extension of Maryland to 34th Street has come into this conversation many, many a time. And as much as I'm going to encourage city administration, our engineering and our planning department to try and get that moving as quickly as possible, not 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, but I'm talking 2 to 3 years down the road. I think that'll help. I don't think it'll solve this problem, because people are creatures of habit. And regardless if we have an extension of Maryland at 34th Street, that little shortcut is still there, and they're going to take the quickest way. And that's the quickest way, mostly coming out of Brookwood to Claus Lakeview, is to come down Aberdeen. You can build another road down there on Patricia all you want. It's not going to solve the problem. It might alleviate it a bit, but it will not solve it. And that's just a personal opinion, but I really see that based on the report we got back from engineering and that. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that and invite others to get into discussion on that. And thank you all for attending the public hearing that night too, because you got a pretty good broad view of what we're dealing with here. So.
Thank you very much for introducing that and a good summation, Councillor Berry. So we will open the floor. We'll be expected of us to obviously take a vote on this. As Councillor Berry indicated, these are never easy. There's certainly no perfect solution to this. There'll be people that won't be completely happy with this on either side of this, depending on what comes about. But we've certainly heard all the points of view, both at the hearing and with some written submissions, and as we're asked to do, we'll make a decision. So I have Councillor Fawcett, then Councillor Parker. Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. And it was good to have these discussions and that. I applaud Councillor Berry for presenting it as safety over convenience. Those are false equivalencies in this case, because who wouldn't choose safety over convenience in any situation? And every street in the city could have that discussion. Safety over convenience. A little bit like years ago when I was on the chamber and we'd go to the school board and it was always, what about the children, what about the children, what about the children? You know what, we love the children, we'll do anything for the children, but there is always about the children. Like, so they are kind of false equivalencies. So I think we just have to look at it objectively, not safety and convenience, but objectively. And one thing I have realized with that street, because there's no question, there's zero question that there is an increase of traffic. Having been on that street from the day it was built, worked on it, driven on it, from day one, the day it was built, there's a reason it was built wider than if you go north off of Aberdeen. There's a reason it was built wider. It was because it was part of our traffic flow. And so for about 15 years or more, as we were building Bellafield, as they were building Brookwood, it was under travel. They didn't have near the traffic that it was built for, not even close. So now it has closer to the traffic it was built for, and it does seem significantly higher. No question about that. There's no question. None of those places were there before, but it was built for it. And so any new neighborhood, any place that has expansions going around it, any street that has additional places added to it, are going to see an increase of traffic. And in this case, one of the things that's most noticeable is there was probably 15 or more years of it not getting it. It was underserviced, like well underserviced for the size of road it is. So it's quite noticeable now that the traffic's increased, and it's still not used to the capacity that the road was built for. And knowing people on there, and I understand, my own wife thinks people go speeding through the stop sign and yield sign near our place, and we're on a corner and we had kids, and I imagine when we had our children we'd be saying, well, what about the safety, any street, any person on any street can argue that. I think that we have to be objective. We have to consider everybody that lives around there, everybody that goes on that street, everybody on Brookwood that uses it. They don't use it with ill intent. They go on it and drive on it like they drive on every other city street. It was built that way from day one. They don't turn the other way because the road wasn't built to take that. So I applaud the individuals that live on that street because you are allowed to take it to this extent and have this discussion, and it's healthy for us to have it. My inclination is that we can probably use it for what it's built for, and as Councillor Barry said, one day we will have another road that goes through, and it may be more convenient to get people out of town quicker or different routes faster. My thought is just trying to be objective, because if we go safety versus convenience, we're all for safety all the time. We could take cars off the street. We're all for safety all the time. We can restrict. We've already dropped the speed limit there. Unheard of on any other street other than the schools now. That's just sort of my point on that this was a very one-off. I think I'm with staff and.
Thank you, Councillor Fawcett. And I think I have Councillor Parker next.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I swear Councillor Fawcett and I sat down and rehearsed this because virtually the same concerns. With respect, I think Councillor Barry oversimplified it. Convenience versus safety. To speak to the safety, we did reduce the speed, as everybody knows, for trial to see if that helps alleviate some of the issues. So I won't carry on and say all the things Jeff said that I was going to say, so he's already said it. So I too would stick with administration's recommendation on this to keep it as it is.
Okay, the floor is open. Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe I could, if I could have administration, somebody on administration, just sort of confirm some of the numbers. The last time that I had this conversation, I had kind of requested that they go back and check some of those numbers, and I also asked them if they could do some comparisons to some other collector streets as far as what type of traffic counts we're talking about there. Is there someone that could speak on that?
Yeah, Mr. Bowles, go ahead.
And through Mayor Crest to Councillor Cullen, I will ask Mark Allard to jump on here, or one of his team. But while they're jumping on teams, just to mention that we have been pulling together some data since the last time we discussed this. We're not there yet, and so we're still pulling it together. But I'm sure Mr. Allard or somebody on the team there will do their best to answer your question.
Okay.
And to all of council there. Jennifer Cooey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Both Jennifer Cooey and Sam Van Heusen are available for discussion and question.
Very good. So we can hear you. And did you catch Councillor Cullen's question there? I think there was quite a bit of data provided in the 40-page report that we do have, but Councillor Cullen, you just want to reiterate your, I think it was a comparison to any other similar collector. I guess we were trying to do some benchmarking. Would that be fair, Councillor Cullen?
Yes, thank you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Through your worship to the councillor, Sam Van Heusen has put together just a small comparison for you guys. I'm going to let him speak to this one.
Thanks, Jennifer. In terms of a comparison, I don't have a specific graph that shows it, but Jennifer had a presentation together and showing some of the numbers and the data that are kind of traveling down this segment of road here. And I believe that her numbers were for peak periods that we were looking at entering this subdivision during the peak periods. Trips and traffic that were coming not just from Brookwood but from 34th Street and the north, we're seeing about 60 vehicles per hour, per that peak hour. Now, of course, that spread throughout the day. We saw about 500 vehicles or trips on average throughout an average day, a weekday, entering that subdivision off of Aberdeen Avenue. Of course, these trips are originating not just from Brookwood, but also from 34th Street North and South. And so if we're thinking about that specific segment for a collector street, 60 vehicles an hour is fairly low in comparison to other collector streets within the city. Some collector streets that Councillor Cullen will be familiar with will be Centennial Drive, East Fotheringham Drive, Rosser Avenue in his ward. Some of the other ones that come to mind too are 13th Street, 10th Street, some sections in the East End. We'll see Rosser Avenue, Princess Avenue, Douglas Street, and of course Queens Avenue as well. And a bunch of these streets, not necessarily all of them, but they see significantly higher traffic volumes than just the 60 vehicles per peak hour. We're talking about the hundreds of vehicles per peak hour that we could comfortably handle on a collector street. So that hopefully answers and addresses Councillor Cullen's question. I don't have specific comparisons, numbers to numbers, but what we do see is vehicles in the hundreds as opposed to just 60, talking about that peak hour.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, but obviously you're listening, so don't go away. There might be other questions. So Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Van Heusen or Ms. Cooey. Under the risk assessment portion of the presentation that we received, one of the considerations was on a one-way street, a conversion will have no impact on the speed reduction. And that was one of the sort of defining factors that I noticed in looking through the material. You did propose, though, in saying instead traffic calming measures should be implemented in the Durham Drive corridor to reduce speeds. Aside from the 40-kilometer-an-hour conversion there, which, as Councillor Fawcett mentions, is kind of an anomaly in the city, what other traffic calming measures could be proposed, could be considered, ultimately to look at reducing speed there and moving to that Vision Zero sort of approach?
Yeah, through your worship to the councillor, other forms of traffic calming that the city would be interested in supporting and looking through from administration's perspective would be things like chicanes, which create narrow corridors within the street. We could look into bulb outs. The Durham Drive section is quite wide, being between 12 and 13 meters in width. When there are no vehicles parked on the street, that gives the driver a high level of comfort driving at elevated levels of speed, despite any sort of posted speed limit. And so things that traffic calming would include things like bulb outs, where we would apply infrastructure dollars to create narrow segments within this corridor at strategic locations, places like crosswalks or intersections, and cause a natural tendency for the vehicles to slow down when parked vehicles are not located on the street. Administration had gone through significant improvements to the Durham Drive corridor in this section a few years ago in correcting its its drivability. Previously, it was quite bumpy and not as smooth, and so combined with the width of the road, the lack of on-street parked vehicles during the daytime and perhaps at nighttime, cause an increased level of comfort for drivers to do that. So, like I said, chicanes or bulb outs would be considered. Typically, we don't consider stop control at intersections as a method to traffic calm. Stop control is typically used to reduce conflict and increase safety at key intersections where there's issues for like sight lines or increased pedestrian activity. And certainly we're willing to look into that to see if there are those conflicts available, and then of course that would form natural traffic calming. But typically what we really focus on is piloting some chicanes in the short term, given that more longer term bulb outs would require a discussion around infrastructure spending.
Go ahead, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a very quick follow-up. Thank you for that, Mr. Van Heusen. The other one that I noted in that risk assessment, and I'll be very quick with this, if one-way should be implemented, the eastbound Aberdeen traffic volumes will be transferred to other intersections within the southwest, such as Parkdale Drive and Richmond Avenue. Now, Richmond Avenue, we already know as a capacity to be able to handle that. But is there some fear from an administration standpoint that transferring potentially that to Parkdale Drive just punts the problem down the street, so to speak?
Through your worship to the councillor, if we're talking about that average from the report of about 500 vehicles a day, yes, those vehicles, some of them certainly are destination and origin traffic trips, meaning that they either finish or start their trip within the Parkdale Drive neighborhood. And so those trips for sure would transfer to another location, be it Parkdale, be it Durham Drive on the other side by taking 26th Street, or certainly into the south end at Maryland Avenue through Marquee. In terms of how much of those 500 average daily trips or 60 trips in a peak hour that would be transferred, engineering would have to take a look at that on an ongoing basis depending on the decision and outcome tonight. But again, I'll press upon that we're talking about 60 peak hour trips, which is fairly low for a collector street access point into a neighborhood. We're certain that some of those legs could accommodate that, but again, we would have to ongoing monitor that should a decision be made in that favor.
Thank you very much.
And I have Councillor Lupke, then Barry, and then Desjarlais.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of quick comments. I would say that of all the submissions that we got from the public, the one that probably struck me the most was the one from the Brandon School Division and the impact it would have on their bus routes if this were to be changed to a one-way street. I did make the suggestion to Councillor Barry that perhaps if it was a 2-month pilot project for July and August that had less impact on the school division and less impact on parents taking their kids to school and see what impact it would have, it might be an option for me. And I would just say the other thing is we heard a very robust report on the Vision Zero strategy from our administration, and I hope that we are looking at pursuing that a little bit further, and that may help a lot of these traffic issues that are not only in this situation, but certainly a lot of others that we are all aware of in some of our own wards.
Thank you. And Councillor Barry, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you to administration, I guess Sam probably is going to take this one. Sam, in the report that Jennifer did, I know there was a lot of suggestions, and this is kind of going to where I'm going to go with this, is there was a lot of suggestions that were brought out from the ward meeting, and when the initial report from engineering came out back in December, the recommendations from engineering were no, 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 straight across the board. The people are looking for some help here. Volume of traffic is the biggest problem. It's obviously this is not going to be an easy solution. It's not going to be a we can fix this tomorrow solution without doing the one way. The other things that were recommended and suggested by the people that actually live on that street and in the area that would help with some of the issue, especially the speeding, is having some three-way stops, and especially at two strategic corners, one being Aberdeen and Durham, and the second one being at Marquis Drive in Durham, which would effectively slow the traffic coming around that circle quite a bit. And again, it would help alleviate some of the problem with the speed. It's certainly not going to alleviate the problem with the volume. But I would really like to see us take a serious look at this. I know there's a downside to it with cars stopping and accelerating at the noise, but you know what? There's going to be bad in everything we're trying to do good. But we got to start trying something different and not just keep saying no, no, no all the time. I think the three-way stops, which has been suggested by many residents in that area, would be a good place for us to start. It's quick, it's effective, cost-wise it's fairly cheap, and I think we just need to take some other steps like we did with the reducing of the traffic speed to try to get some things resolved there. This coming summer, I saw in the report, Marquis Drive is going to be shut down for construction because it needs to be rebuilt. Patricia Avenue is eventually going to be shut down entirely because of all the drainage work that's going to be done up there and stuff that's going in there. So my fear is that the increase in traffic going between Aberdeen and along Durham is only going to be greater this summer than what it is now, because you're now going to have two less streets that these people are going to be able to go out on. So, and I'd like to get that addressed before it happens as opposed to dealing with it when the complaints start rolling in, so to speak.
Through your worship to the councillor, I guess to respond, I'm assuming your question is, can we look at three-way stop control at those locations? Certainly we can look at that, but I'll yield back to my comment previous, is that we typically look at stop control as a conflict management perspective with regards to, like from a safety perspective, where we see increased collisions, where we see non-compliance with regards to stop control existing, and various other factors there. Certainly speed, certainly volumes go into that equation, and certainly we can look at that at council's request.
All up, your worship. Thank you. Like, again, you're mentioning all the ones, but speed is the factor, and it is a concern. And this is one way to quickly solve that problem on that big street there. So I'm going to really encourage administration and through the city manager that we take a serious look at doing that and doing it, fairly soon.
Go ahead, Mr. Bowles.
Yeah, and I hate to harp on data collection, but we are in the middle of winter, and so as things warm up and snow starts melting, we can start getting some better statistics. This, as far as administration is concerned, this is sort of started some analysis on Durham Drive and Aberdeen, and so we'll be continuing to look at the science of what's happening. We don't have good data yet, but we're going to get it, and then we can make more recommendations to council.
And Councillor Desjardins.
Yeah, through your worship, before I ask any other questions, I did have a question for Councillor Barry, if he recalls, like the volume of traffic, is it really at specific times of the day where it's frightening the volume, or is this like a pretty much all day they're complaining about the traffic volumes on Durham?
Through your worship to Councillor Desjardins, it's specific times primarily.
Yeah.
There's times of the day that it's very, very busy, and other times that it's just normal.
Right.
And that seems to be, part of the issue there.
Yeah, and so, I don't know how we're going to get ourselves out of this one, and July and August, it might, like when Councillor Lupke brought that up, it might work, because I really think that it's problems on Richmond. Not problems, but just our circumstance, our situation on Richmond that has a lot of folks from Brookwood making the choice to go to Aberdeen at certain times of the day, right? And I had the pleasure of experiencing that one morning. So I was trying to take a left on Richmond off the Linden Lanes. 7 minutes I waited. And the cars were lined up, packed around the 34th Street roundabout, back the other, like west, going west, so it was coming from Brookwood, all the cars were packed solid, stopped in the roundabout because kids were walking across the street from Durham to Linden Lanes. So if that's happening at certain times, that's why people, I'm sure that's why some were saying, I'm not taking Richmond at this time of day because it's a nightmare. I can't get to work. I can't get there on time. So I think in the summer, if we decided to go one way on Aberdeen, it's not going to matter. It's going to be fine. Richmond will be able to handle it because there's no kids in school, and that's really where some of the big challenges are. And in the future, I mean, I don't know what we do there. Can we raise the pedestrian crossing for kids so that when they're crossing, they're just above ground rather than having to stop traffic? Because Richmond's going to be dealing with that forever. Or do they go under? Do we have to create a tunnel underneath there? Because that's one of the big challenges we have. And until we fix Marquis and 34th Street or Patricia, we're going to be dealing with this for a long time.
Go ahead, Councillor Berry, you had a comment on that?
I do. Thank you, Worship, through you, Mr. Desjardins. And I'm actually glad you brought up that point about Richmond Avenue, because it's actually going to be a discussion hopefully brought on council here in the future by myself. One of the things, and one of the biggest worries, and one of the conversations I've had from a lot of people coming out of this discussion is if we were to shut down Aberdeen, all the traffic's going to go to Richmond. It's not going to go to Parkdale. I've lived in the area for 35 years, believe me. People aren't going to go use Parkdale. It's not going to be that convenient to use it. They're going to use Richmond, and that's what they're going to do. That crosswalk on Linden Boulevard / Parkdale and Richmond Avenue, and also the one at 22nd Street and Richmond Avenue, are, to put it lightly, nightmares for drivers and nightmare for kids that have to cross there to go to both those schools. And I really want to see the city in the very near future investigate the possibilities of putting up some sort of timing lights there, so that traffic can move both north, south, east, west, while kids are going to school during peak times of day, and the rest of the time they're basically left open. So in your mornings, your lunchtime, and after school, you've got controlled stoplights that are stopping traffic going both ways so that both the kids can cross, traffic can cross, but you keep the flow of traffic. I've got stuck in 22nd in Richmond, heading back to the shop from out of town when I'm coming back in, numerous times on that crosswalk, and it's just one flow after another. Kids, and some of them don't always walk the fastest going across the street, and you can be stuck there for a while, and it does really tie up traffic, like Councillor Desjardins said, and that's a problem on both corners. And I don't know why we can't do something fairly simple to just try to control that at peak times of the day, 8 to 9 in the morning, 11:30 a.m. to 1 o'clock when the kids are going back to and from lunch, and from 3:30 to basically 4:30 in the afternoon. And in my mind, those two sections, I know we don't control the one down at 3rd and Richmond because that's province, but those two are something we can do something about as a city because they're under our jurisdiction. And I'd really like to see us look into doing something on both those areas. So sorry, Councillor Frounder, you didn't mean to step into your word there and that, but it's, I see it every day, every single day, and that I have for a lot of years. So without trying to get off topic here, that's something going forward I would also like to see us look into, but we got to deal with the situation here right now in Durham and the Aberdeen situation. So,
okay. Now back to Councillor Desjardins. Was that your only?
That was in I guess my only other. I don't know if it's a question. Maybe it's to Mr. Van Heusen. Like in the report, it talks about Durham Drive being built out to accommodate 23 times the traffic volume that we're right now getting complaints about. So, like, I understand they're collectors. I'm sure that administration or engineering isn't suggesting that they're anticipating at some point in the future to see traffic volumes 23 times higher than they are now. I just want to make sure that's not what we're thinking is going to happen. No.
I'm not sure if they have a comment. I think they've been referring to. Go ahead, Sam, if you had a response to that.
Sorry, I just realized my mic was muted. My apologies. Councillor Desjardins is correct, like in talking about the capacities and in various scenarios that we see throughout the city. The collector status has a wide range, and we see Durham Drive on the low end of that range for a collector street, just based upon its specific location. We understand that the residents have enjoyed quieter traffic volumes throughout the time living there, especially those who have lived on Durham Drive since their houses were constructed. But certainly, if we compare it to one of our busiest collectors, being 9th Street between Maryland Avenue and Patricia Avenue, those houses were built around the same time, and Maryland or 9th Street had seen significantly more traffic volumes as the neighborhoods around them build out. We're not anticipating to see those volumes on Durham Drive, and the expectation is even if Aberdeen stays in as a two-way street, that the volumes as connections to 34th Street from Bellafield and from Brookwood South build out, that the Durham Drive volumes stay similar to what they are currently.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Cullen?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Sam, when I take a look at the numbers we do have, and I know that you're saying that we want to accumulate more data, but we're trying to make a decision on this tonight, and so we have to use the data that we have right now. So when I look at the westbound numbers that are recorded here at 515, and the eastbound numbers on Aberdeen being 475, so we got 35 cars difference per day in eastbound and westbound. So if we're using the argument that some people are taking a shortcut through, then they would be traveling to the east, which means that we're looking at, the numbers don't add up, that's a big issue, that there's a lot of people that are coming through there, because the difference between the two per day is 35, and then per hour is 2 cars. So I'm struggling with that. The other thing is, if our data is correct, and you're standing by your data, it's like at this present moment, the average speed, the median speed that we kind of shoot for is 39 kilometers an hour, and in the eastbound side, 35. So it's actually going lower than the average is lower than what the new speed limit is being set at. So I'm struggling with. I don't mind fixing problems, but this data that we do have is telling me that this problem does not exist in comparison to Centennial Boulevard, Park Boulevard, Frederick Street, and all the other collectors that are in the city of Brandon. So do I think that the residents think that that there's more traffic than there's ever been on the street? Yes. But I think it's because they've enjoyed a very low traffic count on a collector route, and now it's getting up to speed because now the infill is completing. And yes, I think we have to rework some of the egresses and exits and ins, but I'm actually afraid that if we block one of these, we're actually taking one of those pieces away. As in, instead of, it'll be concentrated somewhere else. Because if the movement, if the difference between east and west is only 2 cars an hour, the best we can hope for is 2 cars an hour that we're going to be changing. So if we eliminate the shortcut, 2 cars an hour. So I'm not, that's the way I'm reading this data. So again, I'm saying that the data was, I have to trust the data. It's like speed counts are really easy and car counts are really easy. There's nothing, there's no rocket science in counting how many cars go by and it's tough, and that's peak at 66 and 64 eastbound and westbound. So I mean, there's only 2 difference between if there's a whole bunch of flow coming out of Bellafield and Brookwood, it's not showing up in this data.
Through your worship to the councillor, a couple of things, and I'll just kind of comment on your commentary there. With regards to the disparity and the differences between eastbound and westbound traffic, that number is within 5%, or at around 5% of the trips observed, and so that's where we would account for trip selection. And it's not the only way in and out of that neighborhood. And so you might have some people exiting the neighborhood or choosing to exit the neighborhood elsewhere as opposed to entering the neighborhood. So that's where the differences between the 515 and the 475 come from. In terms of the speed is a little bit of a tricky thing on this segment of road, being observed between 35 and 39 kilometers an hour. Likely it's that low because as a vehicle is reaching its driving speed, it's starting to slow down for the next stop sign, which are separated by 150 meters of road. And so it's fairly anticipated to see speeds in that area there and not reaching up to the 50 kilometers an hour. In terms of the other speeds that you had referenced on Durham Drive that administration had presented previously when the decision was discussed to reduce Durham Drive to 40 kilometers an hour, those were taken prior to putting signage up. And yes, administration is collecting data throughout this pilot year and not just preparing for a permanent solution for Durham Drive, but also whether or not we're going to make recommendations for the rest of the city. You know, Councillor Barry started the conversation of convenience versus safety, and that also applies to speed within the city. Sure, if you're reducing your speed to 40 kilometers an hour from 50, you're sacrificing convenience of reaching a destination a little bit faster than you would at 40 kilometers an hour, but at the hopes of compromise or reducing a risk of increasing safety with regards to the vulnerable road users that also use the roadways. So I think that answered your questions in there, but if you had any clarifications, please let me know.
Nope, that sounds good, but and so you're saying the speed that shows up on this data at an 85 percentile, 39 and 35, that's before the reduction in speed?
Through your worship to the councillor, no. The 35 and 39 pertains to Aberdeen Avenue, and that data was collected on the 15th of February 2022 in preparation for the public hearing and, of course, this discussion here tonight. We did not collect data prior to the installation of the speed limit reduction on Durham Drive on this segment of Aberdeen Avenue because our assumption was that there wasn't a speed issue on Aberdeen Avenue due to the short length of roadway between two stop-controlled intersections.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, don't have their hands up, so I'm going to kind of weigh in. I think all of us on council, we're always looking for win-win solutions, and most often we find them, and others are certainly more difficult to arrive at. But that is our duty tonight. We will be bringing this to a vote, I would think, rather shortly. So what I am pleased about is that we have a process, we have a system, we have democracy, we've got an open and listening council. In this case, we've got a ward councillor that reflected the concerns of residents of a portion of that ward that were having some issues. So this has received quite a lot of good attention from our traffic people and engineering people, and they're collecting data. They've implemented some manners, and then we had a public hearing, which again is the way our community likes to work, where people do have the opportunity to put their input into it. And we received quite a number of presentations at the hearing that we held at the Keystone Centre. It was a very professional and respectful evening, and so I give our community great credit for that. Similarly, we received quite a number of written submissions, people that weren't able to or didn't choose to be able to come to the in-person hearing, but they did submit as well. So, not surprisingly, we had certainly a number of people that have some concerns and thinks that creating the one way is the way to go, and we had many others that do not believe that that's the way to go. I've had to, like everyone else around the table, had to kind of collate all this information and kind of look at it together. Councillor Lupke did bring up one that was a little larger than some other considerations. That was the input that we did get from Brandon School of Vision about from their transportation department, and that would be a significant impact on them, that they've got 6 bus routes every day that run on that little piece of Aberdeen that is in question here and would have an impact if we were to make that one way. So that was certainly a significant piece of information to have received. Other residents, did indicate, and I'm going to steal a analogy that Councillor Cullen once used in terms of, the little, when you squeeze the balloon in the middle, it just kind of pushes it somewhere else. And we know that about streets and transportation. Now and again, we've got to close a street because of a water main break, or we've got to close a street for a period of time when a street is being rebuilt or repaved or the like. And it's quite miraculous sometimes to see what we do that, because the traffic is going to find a way, and it's a bit like Councillor Chaboy's inquiry about the spring runoff. The water will certainly find its way, and traffic seems to do the same thing. So when we tinker with the system by making one way, it's going to push traffic elsewhere. And I know people did state it that live on Durham are afraid, well, it's going to now push a lot of this same traffic to the north side of Durham. So it's going to be pushed elsewhere, and we're probably going to create a bigger problem somewhere else. Our transportation network is exactly that. It is a network, and it's all about connectivity. Neighborhoods are built to connect to each other. These aren't just freestanding little communities onto their own. We encourage interconnectivity. We're not trying to set up kind of boundaries between one and another. And I'd be very concerned that we start using sort of one-way streets as a means of dealing with sort of traffic calming and safety consideration, because I certainly agree, and that was one of the more stronger arguments presented by someone whose profession was in presenting arguments, that we have to choose between convenience and safety ought to win out. That's certainly an easy premise to put across, but sadly, that argument rests for every single street, every single avenue, every single roadway that we have. That they're put there for the convenience, for the movement of people and vehicles, and yet at the other hand, we hope that they're safe. Sometimes they're not, and we're trying to do all the things that we can to balance that and make them as safe as possible, while at the same time moving people and traffic. I really quite like some of the other suggestions made about the traffic calming that our engineering department are considering, and frankly, the suggestion that Councillor Barry brings up, and I don't profess to be a traffic expert either, but the three-way stops, does seem like a worthy of consideration, like as a fairly straightforward. We're not completely changing the connectivity of anything, but we have lots of those. We don't have that many one-way streets. We have a number of them on very narrow streets, typically in our more core area, but very few others in the community, and it does really kind of change the movement when we have them. And as far as I know, where we have one-way streets, they were not put in to sort of stop traffic or to use as traffic calming. So needless to say, you could tell that I will not be in favor of the motion. I am in favor of hearing the people, and I am in favor of continuing to monitor and put in place every sort of sound traffic principle, traffic calming, three-way stops, all those sorts of things. We've already reduced the speed. We've really yet to see how that's going to kind of kick in. It's going to be interesting data collection. In the real snowy, icy time, doesn't give you the best, with the exception of Clint that puts a snow shovel in his front yard to help out the people that wind up in his yard periodically. So again, I think we need to respect our network. We certainly have heard from the people. Their concerns are real, and yet we do have to take into consideration the normal connectivity, what these streets are built for. This has been stated, was built wider to anticipate more traffic. We're now seeing that kind of traffic. We need to play this out, continue to be putting in place the traffic calming measures, further enforcement if necessary, to make this street as safe as any others. We've got many, many streets that would, really stick their hand up and say, we've got issues as well, and we would be making lots of one-way streets pretty soon if that was our methodology for calming traffic. So I really appreciate the feedback and the input that we have, particularly to Councillor Berry, that's really sort of quarterbacked this particular project and helping these neighbors on both sides of the equation, I might add. Councillor Berry is in not the most enviable position. People that came out were almost all from his ward. Many of them want this one-way put in. Many of them don't want this one-way put in, and so there he is as the ward councillor, not going to be able to make all of his residents happy. However, they should be happy that a process was vigorously followed, and we listened to everyone that wanted to come out, and really that's what we're all about. So that's what I'll have to say about that. Soon we'll come to a motion here, or a question rather. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, through your worship, and good points taken by all. I do want to recognize Councillor Berry being in that tough position and representing his ward effectively. And so there's a couple of things. If this does pass and it doesn't change, one thing that the city does need to do for certain, and it is different than the other areas on collectors, is it is a fully developed street and area that had their construction time 20 some years ago. But because construction is going on sort of all around it, they're getting a lot more construction traffic, which is a little different than just general traffic. Now, last year, I think the city did sort of ask and did receive where construction for Bellafield, and I think in some cases constructions in Brookwood, entered at different areas. And I think it was complied to most of the time, but construction has lots of different people, lots of different groups that work on them. If we could try to enforce that a little bit more and try and get construction traffic off that street, it will inconvenience them a little bit, but that's all right. That is a big difference from a lot of these other streets, is they're a fully developed street that has construction traffic, and will for a few years.
And thanks for bringing that. That's an excellent point, and that certainly was a point raised at the public hearing, and certainly would be something that we'd like to pay attention to. Councillor Berry?
Yes, thank you. Just on your point, thanks for bringing that up. That was actually going to be in my closing comments about that, but thanks for doing that. I will take off from that because it is going to be a problem this summer. I will tell you that right now. If we don't do something, because Marquis Drive is going to be under construction, Patricia Avenue is going to be under construction with some work going on there, and that those trucks are going to be cutting down Durham and across Aberdeen to get between Brookwood and Bellafield all summer. So I'm throwing the gauntlet out there now. We need to put a stop to that before it starts, or it's going to be a bigger issue than it was last year, and it was a big enough issue last year, because now we've just taken 2 more avenues away from them. I'm not even sure how the trucks do in Bellafield are going to, because they won't be able to go in through the south entrance because Patricia's going to be down. So they're going to have to come in off of Maryland, and when they want to go over to Brookwood, they're going to cut down Durham. And there was enough of that problem last year. So I want us to be proactive on this and do something about it before the problem even starts. And I know it starts with the communication to the developers and asking them not to. Some listened last year, a lot didn't, and it created a big problem to the point where we have to rebuild a street because of it on Marquis Drive. And that was strictly because of constructed vehicles wrecking it. So anyway, I'm glad he brought it up. It was going to be comments. I was going to make my closing statements, but
Yeah,
I would really,
we'll take them.
yeah, challenge the administration to keep an eye on that one, so.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, but welcome them. Councillor Chboye, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to support this motion. I think that this city should move forward on the Vision Zero approach of just slowing down all the traffic in residential areas. And we've been reassured from administration that they're going to look toward that mandate of using the Vision Zero approach and not so much about having one or two-way traffic, but just slowing the city down. So I'm not going to support it.
And Councillor Frangi?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make my point clear when it comes to this issue. With respect to Councillor Berry, I understand, your concern about the safety and all that, but if we are to consider the public opinion that we heard prior to the public hearing, I think, and if we're going to make decision tonight, I think I'll stand with the public.
Thank you. And don't we have any other hands up? We're getting near the end of the process then, so I'll allow the mover to close.
You know what? Thanks, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity. I've been making it soapbox speeches in this for 3 months now. I think I've said more than enough on this whole issue, and everybody's heard it over and over and over again. So I'm just going to call for the question on this issue, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate, the question on the floor is of course that Aberdeen Avenue be made a one-way street, and just so it's clear what we're voting on. So we're ready for the question then. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That motion is defeated. Thank you very much. And again, thanks to everyone for their role in this and the ongoing respectful and very engaged discussions on these from all sides. And next item, Madam Clerk.
So, Your Worship, just a technical point. We don't have a decision on this matter right now because that motion was lost. So,
well, then it.
I mean, in
that
some
just
ways,
means it stays the same.
Yeah. I would recommend adopting a receipt of the report and that it remain, just so that it's straight in the books.
Okay, well, that's fine then.
Does that make
sense? Councillor Berry?
Yep. Move, Your Worship, that the report of the Manager of Strategic Infrastructure dated March 2nd, 2022 be received.
Seconded by Councillor Cullen. Now,
there's an and further on that.
You want it both in one?
Yes,
okay.
please.
And that Aberdeen Avenue remain open to both westbound and eastbound traffic.
That cleans it up for me.
Very good. And you're okay seconding that, Councillor Cullen?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there discussion on that? I believe there is then, just to keep us neat and tidy. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And next item, please.
Is the tender for the 2022 contract F for tree planting?
Village tree planting. Councillor Desjardins.
I like tree planting. Through Your Worship, I move that the low bid submitted by Alternative Landscaping Limited to carry out 2022 Contract F tree planting as per tender and specifications at a cost of $86,999.55 be accepted, and further that $20,000 in additional funding be authorized to be expended from the parks reserved for the project.
Seconder, please. Councillor Parker. Mover wish to speak?
Sure, very quickly. We plant trees every year. We usually contract this out. There were 2 bids. Alternative was the lowest bid, and they're going to be planting trees throughout the city. If somebody from administration wanted to give more than that, that's fine, but that's pretty much something.
Yeah, that's fairly straightforward. I think they'd be ready, available for questions if there are any. We're always happy to take them. Not seeing any, though. Any other discussion? Councillor Chboye.
Thank you, Worship. I will support this motion just for the very simple fact that trees are extremely important in our environment to keep our air clean and keep our carbon emissions down. So I think it's great that we are continuing to plant trees in our city.
Hear, hear. Any other discussion?
Well, I guess
Go ahead.
usually same mover can close, right? And I
You sure can.
Thank you. I will say, I know it's been a trying year for snow removal, and it's not always easy. But if we could really do our best to care for some of the trees, especially on in the downtown, it's tough to get in and around the trees for sure. But there's significant damage to our trees downtown. And there's significant damage, I think, to some of the trees in the city because of the snow removal this year. So we kind of put it to the city, get this snow removed, and they're hustling them their butts, but it's at the expense of a lot of our trees. So, I'm hoping that we take that, we consider that, and we take a look and maybe even start planting some of those trees that are likely damaged beyond repair sooner rather than later.
Thanks for that. And I would say, as with everything else, that we would encourage people. I think people are certainly more watchdogs on trees than lots of things. So if we, are seeing trees that are badly damaged and look like they're in trouble, sometimes they can do a little bit of tree surgery there and maybe save them. So we need to be made aware of it. So thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Charlie. And any other discussion before we call the motion? Going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7320, which is an amendment to the borrowing bylaw 7232 for the extension of 34th Street.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that bylaw number 7320 to amend bylaw number 7232 to provide for the issuance of the borrowing and to decrease the amount of authorized borrowing for the construction and extension of 34th Street from Pacific Avenue to McDonald Avenue be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cullen. Mover wishes to speak.
Very briefly, Your Worship, and with the assistance of Mr. Hammond and as well, Ms. Rochelle is available online. But the essence of this is that the bylaw did receive first reading on the 6th of December of 2021, and then it pauses for approval from the municipal board. The approval has proceeded with the amended bylaw through the municipal board, so now we're in the position to have second and third reading on it. But I'm sure Ms. Rochelle would welcome any questions should we have them.
Very good. Well, they are available to answer questions. Again, I think we're fairly aware of all of this one, but we always welcome questions if there are any. Not seeing any. I think we're ready for the question on the motion then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now, is that an amendment or is that second reading?
No, that's second reading. There was no
There was no amendments. Okay, that's right. That's why I'm just used to defaulting to amendments. Then third reading would be in order. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. That threw me as well that there wasn't an amendment in there. So through Your Worship, I move that bylaw number 7320 be read a third and final time.
Seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Any further discussion? Again, as it is third reading, a recorded vote is required. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Giving of notice, Your Worship.
The giving of notice this evening. Seeing none. Next item, please.
A motion to adjourn would be in order, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much.